Not only was I coming into a company that I didn't, in an industry that I had no real inkling about, but the company was also kind of on the rocks. I think the founder had at the time outsourced all sales and service to a third party company. And during that time, it was a complicated business relationship that had, really kind of turned. It had been very successful initially, and then things had kind of changed over time.
Right.
And so the landscape of what was here was this very complicated relationship between the people that some of the people that continue to work here or work with us as contractors, that business and our clients, really was a complex kind of thing to navigate. And I think really it was all kind of comes back down to doing the right thing, delivering, that service, that rock solid service that's part of our core values, that really is part of the DNA of this business.
Welcome to Verify in Field, the Millwork Podcast. Your host, Jacob Edmond, CEO of Ductworks, will be interviewing experts in the industry to bring you insights and knowledge about the latest trends, techniques, and challenges in millwork. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, this podcast is for you. So sit back, relax, and join us as we explore the world of millwork. Here's Jacob.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Verify in Field. Today we have David Fairbanks with us. I'm excited about today's episode. David, as most of you probably know, but if you don't, he is the president and owner of Microvellum. And if you go back to actually, I think our second episode, we had some of his team. We talked about the foundation library. Today we're going to find out a little bit more about David, his background before Microvellum and his journey to Microvellum and what he's learned about the millwork field today. Thanks for joining today, David.
Jacob, thanks so much for having me on. I'm honored to be on your podcast and a big fan of you and what you're doing for this industry. So thanks again.
Absolutely. Well, awesome. So I think to get started, would you maybe share a little bit about your background that people maybe don't know? Because you started before Microvellum, before getting into the millwork industry. You started out in engineering and in software and had a little bit of a career before what you're doing today. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was forced into the millwork industry from a layoff, actually.
Oh, really?
So, I was laid off from a job where I was running operations, kind of in a local business here in the Rogue Valley in Oregon. And I was a scared pup. I had a young family. That was 11 years ago, 2013. And I heard about Microvellum through one of the corporate lawyers that I had worked with there at the company where I was serving. And Clay Swayze, who's still on the team here, called me after that lawyer had floated my name up because I was looking for a job. And a few weeks later, I was working at Microvellum. So something I did not intend to come into the millwork industry or even really knew much about the vast, exciting world that entrepreneurial world that this is. And so I'm super blessed to have that opportunity, and then finding myself in the position that I am a few years after that. It just makes me excited to continue I get to be the leader of this company. And I'm so excited about that and blessed in so many different ways, honoring my talents and the things that I do. Yeah, I came from an environmental engineering background. That was my degree. And I knew kind of going into that I really had an affinity for being a part of the decision-making process and change and things that really allowed me to grow. And so as I was an engineer, I realized that I wanted more. And so I ended up going back to school. I worked and put myself through grad school and got a degree in industrial engineering and a master's in business alongside that at the same time. So that was a kind of a new journey for me. And that was sort of all happening at the same time with the .com age back in 99, 2000, the dot-com thing was happening, and I was so excited about computers and software, and became excited about ERP, and ended up leaving the engineering world and working for IBM. It was very difficult, actually, for that to happen, because they kept asking, what does an environmental engineer want to do working at IBM? And it was something that I had to really just sort of think about my future, and how I could help solve problems, and kind of changing the way that I interacted with them helped me get that job. And because of that, I got into some really great projects at IBM. I learned a lot, and then I ended up working for one of my clients doing an ERP implementation, which is what I really set out to do. And so, and at that point, that was with a stud sensor company called Zircon. They make the handheld stud finders.
Yeah.
So I was the guy doing all the IT work behind the scenes for fulfillment, and we implemented a software package called JD Edwards at the time. Well, that was the first of 12 ERP systems that I've implemented since then, including one here at Microvellum here just this last year. So I have a passion for kind of seeing how software can help streamline and organize business. And because of that first opportunity that I had with IBM and at that company there, it just kind of set me on this path from transitioning from environmental engineering into streamlining business with software. And so here we are at Microvellum, and I'm excited to see what we can be doing here for this industry.
Yeah. So to recap a little bit, make sure I got the timeline straight. So you were environmental engineering and working in environmental engineering, and then you went back to school and then went to work for IBM. Is that right?
That's right.
And that's how you got into, you went back to school, got your MBA, and got into software, and then went to IBM, and from there got into ERP implementations. And so through that process was how you ended up at the company that went through the layoff before you went to Microvellum, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Okay. And so what was your
Exactly.
last role? Like, what were you doing with that company right before you ended up coming to Microvellum?
Yeah. So I ended up running the very last role I was in production. Basically, I managed the assembly process within the company. And so there was, and ahead of that, I had done purchasing. So I ran purchasing and handed that off to a supply chain expert at the time. The company had gone through a bankruptcy, and I had, which was a amazing experience, to be perfectly honest. I had a ball with it. I learned a ton about business and how to really help a company get past some of the difficult financial things that they were doing.
Yeah.
And that equipped me for some of the things that we had to do here at Microvellum, actually, when I first got here.
Yeah.
But so I was running an assembly process. So we had, supply. I had to order supply. I had to help set up the lines and manage the teams that would do the assembly and pack out the finished product. So I was in charge of managing parts and part tracking, and the final assembly into the warehouse for distribution. At that point, there was sort of a redundancy with that position. There was a different person there, and they were going through a purchase. So the buyout of the company was coming.
Yeah.
I didn't really know that. And so it had led through a lot of different operational processes with that bankruptcy, ended up fixing and running purchasing, and then handing that over to an expert. I went into production, and then I ended up basically just redundant at that point.
Yeah.
And so
No,
how I ended up being available. Yeah.
I remember you sharing some of that with me, because there's been I've made some career moves through my career, and you've acted as advisor and mentor for me. And I remember having, I think, a conversation. You shared some of that with me, because my last role was very similar. Went through a wind down and acquisition of sorts, or sell off of asset sale, and similarly my role no longer existed. And I remember you sharing a little bit about that. And it's one of those things that definitely you learn a lot through that process that shapes obviously your future going forward. And you can understand and kind of see those things. Of anybody listening has probably been through acquisition or business transition, that a lot of times those go hand in hand. As, hey, where are the redundancies? Where are the things that we can trim and minimize?
And look at you now.
Yeah.
You've got a business, and you've been able to really make the best of it in a lot of different ways. This podcast, you're really influencing the industry, and the same with me. The opportunities that one opportunity, that door closing and another one opening. You always hear that,
Yeah.
but really, it's just amazing to see how that kind of transpires.
Yeah, sometimes that kind of forces you into a decision you wanted to make or were going to make, but you didn't have to until the circumstances kind of kick you into gear. And I know I'm definitely grateful for it, and I think you're a great example of that as well. So you came into Microvellum then, through these circumstances and opportunity. Talk a little bit about when you came to Microvellum. What did you find, and kind of how did you start diving in and getting your hands dirty? Like what was the state of the company at that point? And, because I know you came in for a specific job, and initially it wasn't, hey, I'm coming and I'm going to buy this company, right? Like you were coming in to do a job, and the business was at that point still owned by, I think, the founder, right? Mr. Peel. He talked a little bit about how things started, where it was at that point.
Yeah, that was a crazy time. Not only was I coming into a company that I didn't, in an industry that I had no real inkling about, but the company was also kind of on the rocks. I think Dave Peel, the founder, had at the time outsourced all sales and service to a third party company, and during that time, it was a complicated business relationship that had, really kind of turned over time. It had been very successful initially, and then things had kind of changed over time.
Right.
And so the landscape of what was here was this very complicated relationship between some of the people that continue to work here or work with us as contractors, that business, and our clients. Really was a complex kind of thing to navigate. And I think, really it was all kind of comes back down to doing the right thing, delivering, that service, that rock solid service that's part of our core values, that really is part of the DNA of this business.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great deal of passion on the people that work in this industry and work for Microvellum and work with Microvellum, and a belief in the capabilities and ability to solve problems that I think is uncanny, and the thing that really attracted me and really helped me fall in love with this business. So, but navigating that at the time, from difficult implementations that went sideways, to really trying to keep financially aground for some time. That was a key thing. So my job really was to come in as the basically sales manager. I had no experience in sales, zero, none. I had no idea. It was one of those things like, sales. What do that's a car salesman. What do you mean by sales? But really I kind of looked back, and I actually went to a training class that changed my life, and I had so much fun with it, because what it was solving problems. It was all about crafting and aligning how you could piece together parts of what you have to make a positive outcome, to create that next thing. And so with the people that were here, with the tools that we had, and the desire to survive, we were able to kind of turn things around. And instead of alienating our clients, we brought them in. In fact, one of the things that we did is we created sort of a user advisory board, of which you were a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole point of that was to really get in tune with what we're hearing from our clients, to help make sure that we were serving them as opposed to, someone else. And
Right.
so that was a huge benefit there. So yeah, I didn't come in knowing that I would even had the slightest inkling that I would ever be in the position that I'm in today.
Right.
I was going there to basically have a job, and I found myself being able to take on challenges that, kind of like I did in the past, where they were big projects, ERP projects for large companies, or a bankruptcy for a company that I was in, and then a similar kind of a thing here where I could help to shape the sales and service so that we could do the right thing for the customer base.
Yeah.
And I think that that's sort of the common theme among in my career.
Yeah. So there's two interesting pieces or ideas in what you just shared that I want to unpack a little bit. One is talking about sales, and you touched on this, that kind of like before you came there, you didn't have hands-on experience with sales, and maybe had an idea that I think many people do of sales, of like almost this kind of like disdainful profession of like convincing people to spend money on things they don't need. I think is a lot of times the connotation it gets, right? But what good sales really becomes, and I'm interested your thoughts on this and kind of advice for people, but I think especially coming from maybe an engineering background, because this is kind of how I think. Like I don't consider myself a good salesman, but when you're solving problems for people, like as a business, that's really what a business is, right? Most businesses start as you're solving a problem, and then people give you money to help solve that problem, and it becomes a business, right? It may be a service, it might be a product, it might be software, whatever it is. And when you really know that solution, you believe in it, it's not really sales in the common, I think, misconception people have of it. It's how do I get the service, the thing that we do well, to the people who need it, and how do we use the business that we've created to creatively solve those problems for people. And I think when you get to that point and I can help this person solve a problem, the sales is secondary, right? And it's kind of inherent of like, I want to help them solve a problem, and this is how I can do it, by making this sale, so to speak. Is that ring true with you at all, and kind of what your experience was of getting into righting the ship and kind of bringing sales internally? It seems like also was probably a little bit of that, getting back to the core values of the business of, hey, we're not just outsourcing this, because that is a model that can work and is successful, but hey, let's get it back to we're actually solving problems for people, not just trying to make a sale. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it all goes back to the authenticity of what you're trying to provide, right? So, I think in the industry, you'll hear it's consultative sales. To me, it's about I have a tool chest, a toolbox, which happens to be the name of our product, which is kind of funny, but I have a toolbox, and that toolbox is made up of service and a software tool, and these multiple things in there. How can we couple those, pair them to, and how am I listening specifically to what's going on to shape a solution that we can present that provides an ROI?
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, there's got to be a reason to do it. And I think the biggest thing is being able to communicate how you take those tools, couple them with the people part of it, to enable a company to transform what they're doing, to go from, some of the manual processes that they may have to that they can rely on and they do really well, to this other thing where they see themselves, kind of envision themselves walking into the office with the hum of things just happening, because it's flowing from the start of this automation that's able. You have to be able to paint that picture that vision, and knowing that you got to start with the little bits and grow with it over time. Um, that is the joy of selling, and it's an interesting concept that I never ever, as a going to school as a engineer, ever thought I'd be a part of. That I
Yeah.
end up just absolutely loving. And actually, it is engineering. It's just a different thing. So
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, what you just described reminds me of, I don't know if you've heard of Donald Miller, but he is a coach, a writer, and he's developed this process called brand script or story brand. But it's all about basically the idea of making your customer, your client, the hero in their own story. And as opposed to, hey, I'm selling you Microvellum and this is why it's so great. It's no, through working with Microvellum, you're painting this picture like you just described with the customer. Hey, look, wouldn't it be great if you came in every day and what you're trying to do is made easier by incorporating Microvellum as a part of your process, as opposed to, here's why Microvellum is so great. It's, hey, look, this is what it's going to enable you to do. And what your goal is as your customers isn't to use Microvellum. Their goal is to make a product. And that's one of the tools they're going to use to get there. And so the idea of painting a picture of what problem are you solving for your customer, and how does it enable them to be the hero in their own journey?
Yeah. I think, you have to have that vision of where, like, exactly like what you said. And at Microvellum, actually, we spent some time putting this down. It sounds so simple, and these statements, when they're written, they look so trite, but it really is true. And I think it's core to who we are as a company. And I'm just going to read it because I think it says a lot about what we just were talking about. But our vision at Microvellum is we see a world where people have the freedom and flexibility to create extraordinary things with ease. And so for everything that we do, from the software that we create, from the projects that we provide, from the tools that we are, and the services that we are trying to provide, are all aligned around trying to get to that unattainable vision. That unattainable vision will keep us going forever. And however we end up doing that is my goal and what we are aligned here to try and do. And I think that really encapsulates a lot of what we were just talking about. Is
Mm-hmm.
the selling part really is about casting a vision that we can be a part of. It's not everything, it's just a part of. And I love to see the transformation of companies in this industry go from what they were doing to what they could do. And it's just great to hear the stories in the industry where it has been successful.
Yeah. Yeah. The other piece of kind of what you were describing that I wanted to unpack and kind of get your thoughts on is the idea of, you described, you never anticipated or kind of envisioned yourself here. Even when you came to Microvellum, it wasn't, oh, I'm going to be the owner or president or whatever one day, right? And throughout your career, it's been about problem solving, right? With that engineer mindset, how am I solving another problem, and kind of building on what I've known to solve bigger and better problems to some extent. And I'm sure you get this, but a lot of times you get to a stage in your career, and then younger, earlier career people will reach out and like, hey, how do I get to where you are? And what advice would you have for me? And I think a lot of times young people think about like, okay, how do I jump to this person I'm, where they're at? But that's not how you get there, right? And it's not that you planned and set out on this journey with the end goal being owner and president of Microvellum, but you ended up there. And so I think it's the idea of the advice to those that I usually try to give is, in general, if you are solving problems for your company, for your boss, for your peers, for your coworkers, you're adding value. And that's really what it's about. And through that, you're learning and you're gaining experience. But two, as long as you're adding value, there's a need. You're going to have gainful employment, those types of things. Like, is there any kind of core advice you would offer to younger career people about how to think about that and how to take action today without knowing exactly where you're going to end up?
Yeah. I think the key is being technical early in your career. Staying technical. It's easy to um, do something that isn't adding, like you just said, adding value.
Mm-hmm.
But really becoming an expert in a particular kind of facet, it doesn't matter what it is, really will help you from a technical standpoint be able to have the chops to be able to talk to um, any industry in any way, because then you're able to apply what you've learned from that one other technical thing to the other. So yeah, I mean, maybe I'm biased, but jumping from you know, a pure kind of, you know, generic sort of education or training into this, like what for me, I think would be impossible, because I think I had a little bit of, even though I didn't know the industry, I did have a background in, you know, manufacturing, industrial engineering, software, that kind of coupled together at one time, and experience over time that allowed me to have meaningful conversations with the people that work here, and to prove that, you know, yeah, we could get from A to B. And so without that technical deep dive, you know, early in your career, where you're adding value and you're solving problems, I think it would be difficult to get much farther unless you're just lucky for some reason,
Right.
super lucky. So I think my advice is stay technical early in your career, and then it'll kind of come.
Yeah.
Opportunities will come.
Yeah. And I think that, so related to that, because you've mentioned, that you didn't come from Millwork Industry initially, right? Your experience has been since you've been in Microvellum. But, and I think our industry now, Millwork, is, these are my words, I think is one that likes to gatekeep. So a lot of, and I think, well, if you didn't grow up on the shop floor, you didn't spend 10 years installing, you didn't do this stuff, right? Like you're not one of us type mindsets a lot of times. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of that mindset can limit organizations from gaining valuable knowledge from external sources, or from people that have a lot of knowledge. And so to that point, I guess, are there things that, looking back now from your technical hands-on experience prior to Microvellum, that have carried over, or you've been able to reach back in that toolbox and say, well, this is something I can leverage. This is experience I'm drawing on. This is knowledge I have now that I'm able to apply in this new industry, this new situation?
Yeah. You know, you just touched on something. So the reason why I left engineering was because I was limited because of that exact mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are, you know, individuals that really are, you know, they're better at the details in engineering than I ever would have been.
Right.
But there's different kind of levels to that technical deep dive that you can do, and people may get more joy from that very, very detailed engineering and development over time than I was getting, and I felt limited, and it wasn't moving fast enough, and it wasn't big enough for my personality.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was kind of just thinking back when you were talking about why I left engineering, was because of the exact thing that I think could happen in, you know, where you said there's a gate, so to speak, or a rite of passage that you have to even get into the back office where the
Mm-hmm.
engineering is done.
Right.
And so, you know, I think you have to have a good environment. That the company that you're working at has to believe in growth of the individuals and have an interest in that for them to continue to grow. And if that's not happening and you have that kind of calling, then it could be a calling for a change, and to find a place where you can do that is important. And I think you got to be willing to get out on a limb and do that type of thing. So a little bit more advice there on that same that same topic, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now, over the last, 10, 11, 12 years now, you've been at Microvellum. Because you had many years of experience in engineering and in kind of software proper and some other industries. Is there anything you've learned since being in the millwork industry and really fully immersed in this kind of bubble we live in sometimes to an extent, right? As every industry kind of is. Are there any learnings, one, that you've learned that's unique about millwork? Or two, any things that kind of is more kind of common and true of just people and organizations that you found was true outside of millwork as well?
I find this industry very entrepreneurial. I think that stands out to me. I love seeing the craftsman turn into a technologist. It's kind of where the craft meets tech,
Mm-hmm.
and you know the the material of wood and the wood products and technology with robots and CNC and software, that mixture is very, very unique. I mean, there's some other industries that are similar, but I love the entrepreneurial prowess that the people in this industry have. I love that they're trying to create a place for young workers. I love their passion for education, for getting more people in this industry. And I think the other thing that sticks out, so not only is it entrepreneurial, but it also is behind the times. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there is a speed at which the rest of or many other industries move that our industry is just behind in,
Right.
and there's so much opportunity there for the businesses to excel and find the right mix of craft and tech. I mean, it can happen. And so I think those are kind of the key learnings, to be able to support that young entrepreneur or that one that started in the industry and is branching out on their own and starting up their own shop, to the ones that are highly automated, where they have many machines or many lines or many plants potentially as well. So I just love the difference, seeing how those different size companies and how they work together and how they've transformed over time, really just impact our community.
Yeah, I was thinking as you were describing, because I would totally agree. Entrepreneurial and I would say maybe slow to change. Um, and if anything, I think they're probably related, or intertwined, those two characteristics. And that if we were to personify the architectural millwork industry into a character, a person, right? I would see this, and it is a kind of a later career entrepreneur, business owner that started as a one-man garage shop and kind of developed into, almost begrudgingly, into a full-blown business, right? And this is true for many of the shops in our industry, right? It started small and it really grew over many decades, but it's still being run mostly by a single entrepreneur. And that entrepreneur kind of has a way of doing things that has been developed through experience, through trial and error, and has kind of ingrained itself into, hey, this is the way we do this because it's proven. But what comes with that is a resistance to change, because no, I'm going to stick with what I know works. And so I think that characteristic of our industry as a whole, of being resistant to change, slow to change, kind of waiting to see how this new technology works, let other people try it, and we'll adopt it, in 10 years once it's proven. I think is related to that entrepreneurial side of things, because so much of our industry is an established business that is slow to change, and slow to take big risks that are going to put their people at risk of but has sustained through crises and downturns and things like that. So, I know me being, early career, young, coming up in this industry, that was always a frustrating thing for me. I'd be like, look at whatever all these other people are doing. Why are we not doing that? Why are we not taking advantage of this or adopting these new things? But on the other side of that is, hey, you don't understand what it is to run a business and how much risk that puts us in and how much that costs and what if it fails and all those types of things. So I think it's interesting to hear your perspective and how I think what that entrepreneurship really probably informs and shapes that resistance to change. And similarly, like my previous company at USA Millwork, I think is another example of that. That's very quick, very hard for innovation to last in this industry because there's a lot of things that are so ingrained and proven that the way they work is how they work.
Yeah, and I think one of the limiters for the entrepreneurs trying to grow is talent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they often, what I see is catering to an individual because they do things a certain way and it's proven, like you said, and to change means that person has to change. And then that person changing is a difficult conversation, difficult for them to know that they need to change. And then that entrepreneur gets stuck because the risk of losing or alienating or providing a new working environment is greater than the benefit they feel is greater than the benefit and the return on investment and they can't see past that.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge limiter also for this industry. And it probably is, it's not just this industry, but we definitely see it here for sure.
It is very rampant in our industry. I did, my first year with Ductworks, I traveled and consulted with over a dozen companies, went on site, and it was owners reaching out saying, hey, how can we improve our engineering? How can I get to where engineering is not our bottleneck? What should we be doing? What best practice should we be improving? And every business was unique. They had different product types. Some used Microvellum, some used other software. There were things that were different about them. But as I went and consulted with more and more companies, there were certain things that I found to be common and very true across all of them. And I kind of began to shape like, oh, everybody's struggling with this. And one of those things that was true for virtually every single company I went and visited with, and almost everyone I worked for before that, was just what you described. And I think it's due to the way this industry evolved. But if you imagine a company that's been started in the 80s or 90s, very, you had a table saw, you had very manual processes, and then here comes CNC and here comes CAD CAM software, right? And it's, hey, let's buy a CNC. Now we need somebody to run and program that. Well, Joe, who has been on the shop floor for 10 years or 20 years, let's move him into the office and he's going to learn CAD. He's going to develop that. That is like kind of in a nutshell how millwork design and engineering, how every engineer that's out there today kind of started. That's how almost every company adopted the technology they have today. And what hasn't really happened since then is, well, how do we now make that person to replace them? Because all of these engineers are late career now. And so you have all these companies, and going back to the companies I was consulting with, and the common thing was you have these owners who have a single, very tenured, trusted technical expert that is resistant to change and isn't a very good teacher. He's very good at what he does. He's a safe set of hands. I know that when I give him a project, it's going to get done. It's going to get done right. It's going to get done well. Nobody knows exactly how he does it, and he's not really equipped to teach somebody else what he does. And so you have a difficult decision and a difficult circumstance, and then you have an owner there saying, hey, look, I'm trying to grow this business, and I actually have a lot more demand than I can handle right now. And I don't know how to work around this individual. I can't afford to lose him. And I can't afford to have that difficult conversation of like, hey, you've been with me for 20 years and you're great at what you do, and I can't afford to lose you, but I need you to change, and I need you to help me change and help me to grow what you're doing and include other people. And I found this repeated over and over again. And it was like, you have a business that begins to try to work around this individual instead of through them. And they're at a crossroads. And I think that so many businesses in our industry are specifically at that stage right now and have some version of that dilemma.
Yeah. And guess whose fault that is?
I mean, it's somewhat self-induced, right?
It is. It's that entrepreneur, it's that leader's fault.
Yeah.
And what I find in any project that is going to make a change is the involvement of the top level leadership in that project, and seeing its success is the number one change or differentiator between a successful implementation of whatever the technology is and not. Their involvement, their frontline leadership, not leading from the back, but leading from the front, where they're in there doing the work of seeing the project and leading that change. That change can happen if that leader makes that choice to do that and maybe they have to sew a hole in their schedule, or maybe they're going to have to work even more, which is hard to do, and they have all the pressures and challenges of that. But if you can get that leader, and it could be a mid-level leader, or it could be the owner, or it just depends on the kind of company it is. But if there is a true champion that has that engineering inquisitive mindset that can lead through that project, that's the differentiator between the company that grows and adopts technology for the long run and the one that doesn't.
Yeah. And I think, and this is something that I'm still learning, but I learned a lot, especially by doing it wrong and I think in engineering and technical fields, it's very common that companies will take and they'll say, hey, I've got 3 or 4 engineers, but Jacob is the most skilled, he's the most efficient, the most productive. He's now the leader of the group. Okay. And so you're promoting somebody who you think is most equipped to be the leader. And so what my instinct was, and which is very common in that, is, that means that I'm doing a very good job. So everybody should be doing things exactly the way I do them. So far seems logical, but the trouble comes in that the way I've developed of doing things, the processes I've done are based around my knowledge, my skills, how I'm equipped and how I understand things. That doesn't necessarily translate to everybody on my team. And so when you're trying to develop SOPs and processes and, hey, this is how we as a team are going to do things, one, it's very important that it's uniform and consistent when you're getting into scale. And 2, that it's, built for the least common denominator. Hey, you're entry-level people. You're people that may not, like I personally, I have a really good grasp on trigonometry. I tend towards things that I may be strengths of mine, and I'm going to steer away from things that are weaknesses of mine. And that's not necessarily the same for everybody on my team that I've hired. And so what happens is you end up with a leader that is trying to basically build process that says, well, this works when I do it. I can do this. I can remember to follow all these steps, and that's easy for me. So everybody should do it exactly the way I do. And then you have a bunch of people failing at the process, and you're not really yielding the result the business needs. And so that and a lot of times the business, then your real leaders over that and say, oh, well, this isn't working. Let me pull this person out, or what am I going to do here? And from an outsider's perspective, I went into many of these companies, and it's easy to say, hey, you're going to hire me to come in and consult and point out your problem. But as you alluded to, ultimately, it's the leaders and the owners of that business who are going to make a change. Like, I can tell you, here's your problem, here's what you need to do, but you still have to do it. And that's where the hard part comes in. And I think so many owners struggle because when you get into things like engineering and any other technical things, as an owner, you're not as deep as maybe your engineering manager. And it's very easy for them to kind of push back and say, well, I'm going to use a bunch of technical terms and give you reasons why we can't do what you're suggesting. And I think as an owner, you start to say, well, maybe he's right. I don't feel equipped to push back on this. But if you're managing to results and saying, look, here's the result I need, and I need a leader who's going to be able to get me those results, and not just try to replicate himself in a way that's not feasible. So I think that it is a very difficult problem. And I think as I've seen now, and I know you have, a lot of people struggle with it. In what you do now and at Microvellum, how have you gone about, because you're alluding to this, and I think you've had to make some difficult decisions around personnel and just business decisions and how you're structuring what you guys do. What advice do you have about that type of dilemma for an entrepreneur or business owner?
Well, for better or worse, I'll give you an example. We went through a systems swap out. We've done it a couple times, but I think the difference this last time is that I did what I just said I did, is to actually, I became a part of learning and understanding and being able to translate the way our business works into that solution. So we replaced our entire financial system, our CRM, our licensing system. We have a new portal. All happened in basically about 9 months, which is a huge endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, I'd done it 11 times before. Not to my business. This is the first time really to my business. But again, what I decided to do was really to lead from the front. And when that happens, I am able to communicate with the people that are running it day to day about things that come up after the fact, or how to design something. And I can actually guide, in this case, the consulting company that helped us do it. I was able to guide them and direct them on how we needed it to work so that it worked within, having that business, that understanding of how our business worked. Without that, and that missing link, and just giving it to somebody else without that real true passion about what needed to happen, I think we would have failed. It would have cost us double. We would have had, it wouldn't have been done.
Right.
And so my advice is get plugged in, you learn, and then use your delegation skills to get out of it. Basically, you have to, at that point, coach, ask questions, and turn from the doer back into the leader again, so that your team is equipped to do what they do. And like you said, it has to be lowest common denominator. It has to be as bulletproof as possible for the people that come in that are brand new into the organization.
Right.
You need to make it so that it's repeatable, and there's a certain tenaciousness that has to happen with that. So I think for me, it's about high level leadership plugging in the front, not in the back. You got to do it from the back. That's where everybody wants to be, but really in the front. And actually, that's where I find the most joy is, in these big projects and problems that I get to solve.
Yeah. It's interesting because it really, calls back to your advice earlier about starting technical. And with this, what you just described is, well, we have a new, software we need to implement, and we need to build it to work front to back. And as a leader, I'm going to actually dive in hands-on and understand what it needs to do. And I'm actually going to do that task, process, whatever, and set up to where now I can hand it off to somebody and delegate that, and they have a process in place that they can replicate, and I know it works. But it starts with understanding and really getting hands-on with it. And that is something that I find, even in consulting, and I think probably a lot of this is with customers of a software like Microvellum, is their owners are coming with an expectation of, I'm going to buy a solution to a problem, which is partly what you're selling, but really nothing is that simple of, like, there's no silver bullet to understanding hands-on, like what is the problem you're trying to solve, and to be able to evaluate whether the software I'm trying to buy or this thing I'm trying to implement is going to do that, and how it's going to do that. And you guys, I know with Microvellum is very, that's how you present your product as okay, yes, we have a library, yes, we have all these solutions, but you as a customer, as a consumer, as a user need to take ownership of like, how are we going to implement this and how are we going to use it, and what pieces of it make sense for our business. And I think that really goes with anything. And a lot of times when you get into the weeds as a business owner of, I just want this problem solved and I don't have the capacity to dive in. But nobody's really, going to do that for you. If you do, you take the risk of it not being really fully understood.
Yeah.
Well, awesome.
Or adopted. It won't
adopted.
adopt. You can't get it. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Because I mean, really, when it comes to solutions,
you have wasted a bunch of money.
Right. Yeah. Which happens a lot. Hey, well, we've got this software we invested into this process we adopted and sitting on a shelf because nobody's adopted it. And that's where, I mean, change management is really where it comes in. And I think that it's not just writing a check. It's easy to write out a blueprint or an SOP or say, hey, if you just do this, this, and this, it works. But the best solution doesn't matter if people don't use it. And this is actually something I learned in architecture school, and really why I quit. It frustrated me because I would have these reviews and I was coming from a very practical mindset. And what I didn't understand at the time was that in undergrad, we were really learning about the design process, and I was trying to be a contractor. I was trying to say, well, you couldn't build that because of this technical reason. But what it was is okay, there's a process of solving a problem, and as it really was anything, but as an architect, if I was pitching my solution, it doesn't matter if my solution is the best solution. What matters is the customer going to buy it, and are they going to use it and implement it? Because the best solution is really the one that actually gets used. And there could actually be something that theoretically is better, but if nobody uses it, then it's not better. And I think that's the same way with business processes, software, all the above.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, there's two questions I like to ask every guest, and I'm curious to get your insights on this idea of the first being, what do you foresee changing in our industry, in the millwork industry, over the next 5 to 10 years?
I see high volume manufacturers getting pressure to do custom more and more. So in other words, sort of that mass customization in a lights out environment, I guess, where there's demands from the market for things that aren't just the cookie cutter applications. And so I believe that this industry basically will see more and more of that kind of automation mixed with the ability to customize very quickly. So we see that today. Obviously, push to the cloud, right? So that's a big one, which is so funny to me because if you remember, everything used to be that way back in early days of computing, and now we're kind of, this industry is finally getting to that point where the whole PC server on-prem type thing is going to migrate more and more back to the large monolithic cloud-based solutions that we used to have in the old days, but with the modern platforms. So that's obvious, definitely obvious. I think for Microvellum specifically, I see us being, I would like to see us be drawing tool agnostic. So not necessarily always an AutoCAD or always a Revit or always a Inventor, but being able to manufacture data that's necessary to create whatever they want with ease, right? That goes back to our vision, despite the drawing platform that the company happens to like.
Right.
So ideally, that's what I see happening in our industry as well, is people can pick and choose, and there'll be benefits to one or the other. So, and I guess for Microvellum, I see us really having a large footprint in everything, starting with estimating and design, all the way through, the engineering of the products that are used in that design, to custom engineering, manufacturing processes, and the shop floor, field management as well. So, and other industries potentially.
Right.
Other kinds of industries that are conducive to what we do, and maybe plastics or metal or something like that. So,
Awesome.
but in our industry, I see a consolidation of those kinds of things all into single platforms. Yeah, definitely.
Nice. Yeah. So making it more of, what is not, like you said, it's agnostic, not tied to a single. It's more based on what makes sense for the client and what they're using it for. But the core of it is what Toolbox is built to do, the data and the manufacturing.
Yep. We're in the data business, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on the flip side of that, what do you see staying the same over the next 5 to 10 years?
I think finding talent is going to be difficult, continue to be difficult.
Yeah.
I think our clients finding talent, that is equipped and eager to participate in this industry. I think we need to glam it up a bit for that to kind of attract the people that want to be in here, so that it's okay and good. And I think I do see some of that happening, but I think it's gonna be very slow. Yeah. It is very slow. Yeah. And I think this industry does move slowly, very slowly. I think that's not going to change. It's pressing in, and we're continuing to be slow adopting technologies. But I see that changing, but it's still a slow rate of change.
Right. Awesome. No, I agree.
I don't want to think that way, but I think that's the facts.
Yeah. I think it's very true. And I think it's exciting to hear, your thoughts specifically about Microvellum and where you see you guys go in the next 5 to 10 years. I'm excited to see that journey continue to unfold.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
I really appreciate you taking time to share today, David, about your journey. A lot of insights I think are really valuable for people trying to make a career in this industry, and really in any industry. For people that are interested in finding out more about Microvellum or just about David, what's the best way for them to reach out or to find out more?
Yeah, of course. I mean, our website's a great place to start. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, but our website, www.microvellum.com. And we're everywhere in all the places. So
awesome.
It's
we'll make sure to link that for everybody in the show notes, and look forward to having you on in the future and continuing to follow along with this journey with Microvellum.
Jacob, thanks for all you do. Again, it's a pleasure. Appreciate the chance to be on here, and have a wonderful day. Thanks.
Awesome. Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Do you want to stay up to date about industry insights, new content, and our community of millworkers? Go to ductworksmw.com to sign up for our newsletter. I'll see you in the next episode of Verify in Field.